Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, which is the source. Krishna is the source of all incarnations. You're up to text number 40. We're going to read text 40 to 43, which is all those verses, those 4 verses, and many others, are all glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Before reciting, let's say this together. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan, Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, Prabhupada, the translator and commentator, by regular attendance in classes of the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead is established as an irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna. So can we chant the Sanskrit together for these verses? Yeah. We won't do it, repeatedly. We'll just do it together. Is that okay? Text 40, because these are very special verses. And before I even start, I'm going to say, Om Aginatimidandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksur Umilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master very kindly forced to open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. Therefore, I'm indebted to him and beg for service life after life. There's another prayer I learned about glorifying the spiritual master. I think it's Suradas who said this prayer. It says, my spiritual master gave me beautiful kantimala, effulgent tilak, the beautiful form of devotee, and he offered me a shelter. In one of his hands, he's holding my hand, and in his other hand, he's holding the lamp of knowledge, which helps one cross over the dark ocean of material suffering. My guru deserves the greatest respect because only he can save one in the blinking of an eye. I like that one. Hare Krishna. Okay, so on text 40, we'll just repeat, okay? Idam Bhagavatam Nama. Repeat means I'm going to say one line and you say one line. Idam Bhagavatam Nama. Puranam Brahma Samhitam. Uttama Shloka Charitam. Chakara Bhagavan Rishi. Nishreyasya lokasya Danyam Shvastyan Yanam Mahat. So Idam Bhagavatam Nama. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. And it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Let's say it together, okay? This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. So with a description like that of this transcendental literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, it's very encouraging, enlivening, and should, and hopefully will, enthuse us to take Srimad Bhagavatam seriously. It's Krishna himself you've probably experienced, you might have experienced, and maybe you will experience at a certain point in your life. Sometime there's a question or trouble or this or a circumstance. And if you take the Bhagavatam and you open the Bhagavatam, you'll find some clue, some relief, some direction, something that's directly towards you. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is not like a dead book. It's not just a book that was written thousands of years ago, this and that, and has a certain relevancy for a certain time and place. Surely you've experienced reading Srila Prabhupada's purports as if they were just written yesterday, that even though he's commenting on a world situation that when in the 60s, when he maybe first composed the beginning parts of the Bhagavatam, still it's so applicable today because it's all good, it's all blissful, it's all perfect, and it's good for all people at all times because it goes to the core. It's going to the core of our existence, not our external existence and temporary situation, but the core of our existence, which is ultimately the same for everyone, that we're eternal spirit souls trying to experience an eternal happiness in a temporary world full of misery. And it somehow or other just isn't jiving. Even though it might work for a little while here and there, it doesn't jive. Okay, so even though, let me just see. Okay, this isn't such a long purport, but these 4 verses, they should each have a separate class. Haribol. But anyway, would you like to read? Nishta, would you like to read? Thank you, Krishna. The purport, yeah.
Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declared that Srimad Bhagavatam is a spotless sound representation of all Vedic knowledge and history. There are selected histories of great devotees who are in direct contact with the personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam is a literary incarnation of Lord Sri Krishna and is therefore non-different from him.
Can you read that one again, that sentence?
Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Lord Sri Krishna and is therefore non-different from him.
Non-different from Krishna. Amazing. Okay, I'll try to control myself. Go on.
Srimad Bhagavatam should be worshipped as respectfully as we worship the Lord. Thereby, we can derive the ultimate blessings of the Lord through its careful and patient study. As God is all light, all bliss, and all perfection, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. We can have all the transcendental light of the Supreme Brahman, Sri Krishna, from the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, provided it is received through the medium of the transparent spiritual master. Lord Chaitanya's private secretary, Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami, advised all intending visitors who came to see the Lord at Puri to make a study of the Bhagavatam from the Person Bhagavatam. Person Bhagavatam is a self-realized bona fide spiritual master, and through him only can one understand the lessons of Bhagavatam in order to receive the desired result. One can derive from the study of the Bhagavatam all benefits that are possible to be derived from the personal presence of the Lord. It carries with it all the transcendental blessings of Lord Sri Krishna that we can expect from his personal contact.
Any points that struck you in that purport? There's about 3 or 4 really wonderful points there. Hopefully you didn't forget them all already. Anything that struck you? Mm-hmm. What did you say?
We hope to meet Krishna and be in his personal presence, where it says that study of Bhagavatam, because it's non-different from Krishna, one can derive all the possible benefits that could be from Lord himself.
Right there. And it's what we're wanting. We're wanting Krishna's presence. We're wanting Krishna's service. So we have that opportunity. So don't neglect the opportunity that we have in front of us. Yes, you have a busy life. Yes, you have lots of responsibilities. Yes, you have lots of this and that and priorities. But if you can make Srimad Bhagavatam, if you can make reading Srimad Bhagavatam a priority in your life, it'll give you a clear path ahead through many difficulties. I could speak more, but I better move on, huh? Okay, verse 41. Tad idam grahayam asa sutam atma vatam varam sarva vedi tihasanam Sharam Sharam Samudritam. So it's the cream. Sharam is the cream. Srila Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the self-realized, after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks a little bit about the history of the Bhagavatam, how it's delivered. It's very importantly and very carefully delivered from the disciplic succession parampara system, that Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Vedic literature, then he presented it to Sukadeva Goswami. Sukadeva Goswami spoke to Maharaj Pariksit, and in that meeting, Suta Goswami was there and heard, and therefore it's intact. The same information that was spoken hundreds and thousands of years ago and compiled throughout the history of the universe is still intact in Srimad Bhagavatam, passed on through scriptures. There's a nice series of lectures that Radhika Raman Prabhu gives about Srimad Bhagavatam and the authenticity of the Bhagavatam, etc., etc., and how one might question, how is it preserved so carefully? And should we have faith? Because there's so many things that were written thousands of years ago, and then as they get passed down, they get a little bit changed, a little bit changed, a little bit changed. And then by the time you get what you get, it is like a total different understanding of what was the original intention. But Srimad Bhagavatam, because of the system of parampara, of the student hearing from the perfected spiritual master who was heard from the spiritual master, then the information is complete. And he was saying how that's unprecedented practically in the history of literature, that a book can be from so long ago and still be so perfect. And he has different scholarly methods that they come up with this conclusion, but it's very nice. So that point that you've heard many times, make sure you're hearing from the right source. Make sure you're hearing from the right source. And what's the right source? The right source is those who have heard from the perfected spiritual master in the line. That's the right source. 42. Satu samshravyayam asa Maharajam Parikshitam Prayo Pavishtam Gangayam Paritam Paramarshibi. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn delivered the Bhagavatam to the great Emperor Pariksit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink. Let's say it together. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn, to the great Emperor Pariksit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink. So the storyline of the Bhagavatam being spoken to Pariksit is all, I'm sure, very familiar to you all. And sometimes when it becomes familiar, we kind of just say, oh yeah, Maharaj Pariksit was cursed, and then he gave up his kingdom, and then he went and sat, and then Sukadeva Goswami came, and Haribol. But if you think about it a little deeply, there he was, the king of the world. Not just the country, not just a prosperous kingdom, not just a prosperous little small tract of land, but the whole world. And not only that, but everybody was happy. That's amazing too, right? And everybody was happy with his ruling potency and everything. And when he offended that Brahmin, very slightly, but still it was an offense, disregarding him, putting that dead snake on him, received the curse from his young 12-year-old-ish son, he immediately put everything aside and went out. 7 days, that's all I have? Okay, not like running around trying to make some little adjustments here and there, and then I'll go 2 days before or whatever. No, right away, he gave up everything. That's quite remarkable in and of itself. And his, the connection Says it usually says how Maharaj Pariksit didn't even eat or drink anything or sleep during those 7 days. And the Acharyas explain that because Maharaj Pariksit was pushed by hunger and thirst, and he was tired from the fight, because he had those three influences on him, he acted a little disrespectfully. So then when he got his curse, he said, I'm not doing any of those things. I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, I'm not drinking, nothing. And then when Sukadeva Goswami started to speak the Bhagavatam, he said to him, I'm not feeling tired at all, or hungry, or thirsty, because I'm drinking through my ears the oral reception of your transcendental words, and therefore I'm feeling totally satisfied. So that potency is there. And we have to make our endeavor. We have to make our endeavor to get a taste for hearing the Bhagavatam. And there's a little endeavor there. There's a little taste there, There's a little taste there, yeah. But if you cultivate that, you cultivate it by trying to set aside, certain amount of time every day or every week or whatever, but regularly hearing, especially as you are entering into the process of bhakti, if you try to develop those that discipline, whatever, however you want to say it, of reading regularly, your taste and your consciousness will become fixed very firmly and very quickly on the Bhagavatam and the nectar that's there. And when you read it, you'll be always getting newer and newer understanding, because it's a living scripture. It's purifying the heart. As the heart becomes purified, the consciousness becomes more clear. So you're reading at one stage and your consciousness is in a certain space, and then you go on doing chanting and hearing, etc., etc. You're reading it again, your consciousness is a little more clear, you catch more things from it. The same section. So check it out. Okay, and here's verse 43. This is also 43 and 44 we're supposed to talk about, right? Okay, anyway, this one here. This one, if you have a taste for memorizing verses, this is a good one. Krishna svadamapagate. Krishna svadamapagate. Dharma jnana dibisaha. Kalau nastadrisham esha. Puranarko dunoditaha. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. Let's say it together. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So look at that verse. When Krishna departed for his own abode, what went with him? Knowledge, religion, all of these very important things went with him. They all went, and there we are, left with just ignorance, right? No, because the Bhagavatam, Krishna left religion, knowledge, etc. went with him, but he left Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the source of dharma, religion, bhakti, and information, as Vyasadeva says here, that due to the dense darkness of ignorance, we can't even see anything properly, understand anything properly, especially who we are and what the goal of life is. But this Bhagavatam is going to provide the light. And 44 too, right? Correct? Is that correct? Okay, thanks. Okay, so today's verse is Tatra kritavyato vipra Viprasher Buri Tejasa Aham Chadyagamam Tatra Nivishtas Tad Anugrahat Soham Vashravayishyami Yataditam Yatamati. O learned Brahmins, when Sukadev Goswami recited the Bhagavatam there in the presence of Maharaj Pariksit, I heard him. This is Suta. Suta Goswami is now saying, okay? That's Suta Goswami. O learned Brahmins, when Sukadev Goswami recited the Bhagavatam there in the presence of Emperor Pariksit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus, by his mercy, I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it. Let's say it together. O learned Brahmins, when Sukadev Goswami recited the Bhagavatam there in the presence of Maharaj Pariksit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus, by his mercy, I learned this Bhagavatam from that great, powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear it from the very same thing as I learned it from him, and as I realized. So here he's giving us an example. This is the disciplic succession, the parampara system in action right from the very beginning. So we're going to read the purport in a half of a minute or two. But putting in our consciousness, Krishna spoke to Lord Brahma after Brahma awoke to consciousness, blah, 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 and wondered what he was doing, what his purpose in life was, what everything. He couldn't figure it out. He performed tapasya for 100 celestial years. Krishna was pleased with him for his effort, and then spoke the 4 seed verses of Bhagavatam, the Chatra Shloki, to him. He spoke the Bhagavatam. In other words, Krishna spoke the Bhagavatam in 4 verses, the whole Bhagavatam. 18,000 slokas it's been expanded to. But he spoke it originally to Brahma in 4 verses. And he told Brahma, now you propagate this Bhagavatam to others. Now you continue the preaching. Brahma spoke to Narada. Narada spoke to Vyasa. And when Vyasa was feeling dissatisfied because he had compiled all these Puranic literatures, but was still feeling dissatisfied, Narada gave him the hint that you need to specifically glorify the Lord and the process of devotional service. Then Vyasadeva compiled the Bhagavatam. And Vyasadev's son, Sukadev, heard the Bhagavatam from his father, and now he's speaking it to Suta. And interestingly enough, in case you don't make the connection, when Balaram decided not to participate in the Kurukshetra war, he went on pilgrimage. And in the course of his pilgrimage, he came to Naimisharanya forest. And at Naimisharanya forest, there was a great assembly of sages, a different assembly, but another assembly of sages who were performing sacrifices for 1,000 years with the intention of trying to ward off some of the influences of the age of Kali. And who can remember the unusual circumstance that happened when Balaram entered the forest of Naimisharanya to hear the sages? Yes, Prabhu.
I think his name is Romaharshan Sutta?
Romaharshan.
He did not stand up when Lord Balaram.
You have to speak a little louder, even though you have the mic there.
Romaharshana Sutta didn't stand up and thus didn't receive Lord Balaram properly with the proper etiquette when he arrived on the scene.
Yes, and then what happened?
Then Lord Balaram took a blade of grass and touched it to his forehead, and with that decapitated him, I think.
He didn't, I don't remember that he decapitated him, but he made the soul leave his body, that's for sure. He killed him. And then what happened? And what was the reaction of the sages?
I don't remember.
Okay, Vadinath is going to tell, or Advaita, you can tell us.
They were like, wait a minute.
Balaram at all.
They were and they weren't, but go on. Then why? Okay.
Yeah, they said, well, wait a minute. We all agree he's going to be there.
And we just gave him blessings.
Yeah.
May you have a long life, and may you speak nicely the scriptures. And then Balaram came around 5 minutes later, pink. And so what was the sages, how did the sages react? What did they say to Lord Balaram? Do you remember that part? Vaninath Prabhu.
They were perplexed. Okay, so what do we do now? So Balaram, that's when his son was installed to speak. And also they gave some prescription for Balaram.
For atonement.
Yes,
Yeah.
for atonement.
Yeah, so thank you. So they were perplexed, and at this, and when they expressed their perplexity, wait a minute, we just gave him this benediction. Balaram said, well, I can bring him back to life if you want. And they said, no. Your actions are perfect, but so are our blessings. Your actions in killing him are perfect, but our blessings are also meant to be perfect. So you don't have to bring him back to life, but you have to keep our blessing intact, that he might have a long life and full understanding of the scriptures. It wasn't hard for Lord Balaram. It didn't take him a long time to figure out what to do. So he gave the benediction to his son, Suta. This is Suta Goswami, the son of Ramaharshan. This is the Suta that we're talking about. Suta Goswami, he gave that benediction that he'd have a long life, that he'd speak the scriptures, and he'd have a nice realization and a good memory of all the scriptures. Just put the little pieces together. It's so interesting. Okay. When all of that isn't even the main point of this. Sorry. Okay. Would you like to start reading the purport, please?
One can certainly see directly the presence of the Lord Sri Krishna in the pages of Bhagavatam, if one has heard it from a self-realized great soul like Sukadev Goswami. One could not, however, learn Bhagavatam from a bogus hired reciter whose aim of life is to earn some money out of such recitation and employ the earning in sex indulgence.
Does Prabhupada ever not pull all the punches out and say it? Okay, continue.
No one can learn Srimad Bhagavatam who is associated with persons engaged in sex life. That is the secret of learning Bhagavatam. Nor can one learn Bhagavatam from one who interprets the text by his mundane scholarship. One has to learn Bhagavatam from the representative of Sukadev Goswami and no one else, if one at all wants to see Lord Krishna in the pages. That is the process, and there is no alternative. Suta Goswami is a bona fide representative of Sukadev Goswami because he wants to present the message which he receives from the great learned Brahmana. Sukadev Goswami presented Bhagavatam as he heard it from his great father, and so also Suta Goswami is presenting Bhagavatam as he heard it from Sukadev Goswami.
Okay, one little thought that just came to my mind. If you remember in Srila Prabhupada's journey in his Krishna consciousness, that's exactly the characteristic that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta noted about Srila Prabhupada. When he went to hear him, it was at blank. Where was that spot that Prabhupada went to hear him in Vrindavan on the Parikram mark? Yes, one time it was Radhakund, but that during the Parikram, they were going to the Parikram participants were going to visit a Seshashayi Vishnu temple or some Vishnu temple on the Parikram mark in Vrindavan, and all the majority of the participants went out on that. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was also giving a lecture that night. So there were a few devotees gathered around to hear Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, including one of them was Srila Prabhupada. And then as the Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's talk went on, different people had different responsibilities and they had to excuse themselves. So towards the end, there was just a very few people, just a couple of people. And Srila Prabhupada was there listening. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj noted him right from that meeting. There wasn't much of a personal exchange at that time between Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj at that time. And there were very few total meetings, but there were some. Anyway, at that time, there was not much of a personal exchange, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj noted he likes to listen. And Srila Prabhupada even says there, he said, sometimes I couldn't understand what he was saying because he would speak in such a highly scholastic and elevated way. And he said, I couldn't even understand what he was saying, but I would hear with rapt attention. I would hear very intently. And that process of hearing is so important. And it's not always easy to manifest that as individual, as aspiring bhaktas. Yeah, we want to come to Bhagavatam class, mostly because if we don't come, there'll be some repercussion or whatever. Or, we like the flow of it and so many things. But to hear with rapt attention, that takes, training. It doesn't just happen right away. And even if it does happen right away, if you ever notice, sometimes people come and they're in different stages. Some people come and they're like dragging their feet and everything's hard and this and that, and they can take prasadam, et cetera, and that's all well and good. And some people come and they can, and everything is difficult. Rising early is difficult. Putting on tilak is not their most favorite thing, and it's always crooked or smooshy or whatever. And some people come and tilak's really easy, and reciting the Sanskrit's really easy, and that their attention is really keenly focused in. It's because they've practiced somehow or other, and it comes along in their next life, those credits. Do you want to continue? Thanks.
Simply hearing is not all. One must realize the text with proper attention. The word Navishta means that Suta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. Okay, so another thing, second or third verse. Pibata Bhagavatam, I think it's the third verse. Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam of the Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, third verse. Drink this nectar through your ears, because it's so purifying and it's so nectarine. And by attentive reception, the taste will increase. That's the thing. Because why? Because it's a living scripture. It's living. It's making its mark. Okay, continue, please. That is the real process of receiving Bhagavatam. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he cannot at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. So here's going to be a nice series. Continue on, but pay attention to this series that Prabhupada is going to talk about, how to hear Bhagavatam nicely. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person, at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Sri Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. Wow, what a nice benediction, no? So, Srila Prabhupada says, let's go over that last couple of sentences. The secret of knowing the Bhagavatam is mentioned here. So, there's a process. Yes, we want people to just come in and hear. That's well and good. That's a start. But to continually hear, there's a process, and that's why there's, organizational programs, to make a center where people can eat purely food that's offered to Krishna, where people can live a pure life. Okay, so Prabhupada says, the secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. So everybody who's not pure in mind, you're disqualified. No, there's a process how to become pure in mind. It doesn't start with be pure in mind. It starts
further down. Let's go down. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. And therefore, when one comes to live in the association of devotees and gets that opportunity, then there's a few basic prerequisites. The 4 regulative principles: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication. That keeps one pure in action. And by doing that, one is in a position living in the association with devotees, and not only just living in the association, but living in the association devotees ensures that there's food that's offered to Krishna, the prasadam. So one takes prasadam, food offered to Krishna. So that means that any abominable substances are not mixed in with the food. So the food is pure, and not only pure, but it's sanctified. Not only sanctified, but it sanctifies one by taking it, by honoring it. And that way, when one eats pure foodstuffs or foodstuff that are offered to the Lord, then your mind and consciousness is elevated. And when your mind and consciousness is elevated, then attraction to those lower modes of nature and things that we used to, quote unquote, get some pleasure from, just wanes totally, practically totally. It lessens so much, and then one actually gets a taste for living in that association. So and experiencing in our Krishna consciousness a taste for Krishna consciousness, and enthusiasm and enlivening, and some sort of enlivening and enlightening association comes from all of these things being in place. So therefore, when we're feeling less enthusiastic, less energetic, less inclined to the process of bhakti yoga, we need to thoughtfully examine our life. What's going on? What am I missing? Some important factors in my life. Maybe I'm eating prasadam. Maybe I'm engaged in service most of the time. But what am I hearing? What am I thinking all the time? And so, yes, I'm hearing the Bhagavatam or stories or this or that, but in my spare time, I'm hearing other things, which everything has an effect on our consciousness. What to speak of, everything has an effect. But so the more we pour into our, Bhagavatam describes the ear holes are very small, but they have unlimited capacity. They have unlimited capacity for hearing. So if we pour into our ears the pure sound vibration more and more and more and more, then that purifies so many things and affects us in so many ways that our taste for those things increase quite automatically. And when one might think, yeah, but I have this responsibility and this, that, and my degree to pursue, etc., etc. That's okay. But if the more you make an attempt to increase your hearing, the more the Lord will give you ways that you'll be able to do it. If you notice, you might think, I don't have any time to do this, but there's always some time. There's always some time, and there's always some device that will assist in hearing. It's a question of what you're choosing, which channel you choose, or which thing you choose to hear on those devices. And that taste will increase. So any comments or discussion on that part just so far? Jai Shishi Gonitai. Yes, Prabhu.
I just also wanted to mention, if you want to increase your attachment to the Bhagavatam, you can also try distributing it.
Yeah, there's a great tip. Try to distribute, and that's the whole process of devotional service. We're not in it just to save ourselves. We're in it to distribute it to others. And by distributing to others, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he who distributes this knowledge to others becomes more dear to me than anybody else. Thank you for that. So there's another aspect of these verses that I wanted to point out to you too. So on text 43, This text 43, the translation is, this Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So there's another important aspect of this verse. If you remember back in the first and second chapters of the Bhagavatam, and you're only on chapter 3, so it wasn't that long ago, the sages had assembled, and they were asking questions. They asked questions to Sukadeva Goswami. 6 questions, the questions of the sages. And one of the questions that the sages asked is, what's happened? Where did religious principles go? Or where did they take shelter after Krishna left the planet? That was the 6th question of the sages, this number 6. And this text 43 is the answer. Dharma, religion and religious principles took shelter in the Bhagavatam. And therefore, those who read the Bhagavatam will get, especially if they read attentively and repeatedly, they'll get the understanding of what are real religious principles and what that process is just by reading the Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport there, I think, in that 43rd verse, that one should worship the Bhagavatam. One should worship the Bhagavatam as one worships the Supreme Lord. So one might think, okay, well, I'll put the Bhagavatam on my altar and I'll offer it incense and flowers. That's very nice that one can do that. There are some very nice prayers one can offer to the Bhagavatam too. That's some of them are by Sanatan Goswami and that are recorded in the Krishna Lila Stava. Sarva Shastradi Piyusa, Sarva Vedaika Satpala. This Bhagavatam, anyway, it glorifies there's 6 verses glorifying the Bhagavatam and the potency of the Bhagavatam. So that's also very nice to offer to the Bhagavatam. But our basic way that we worship the Bhagavatam is by reading it and studying it and trying to imbibe its message and by speaking it to others. That's the way that's inferred that one should worship the Bhagavatam. If and when you visit India, oftentimes you can see in different temples, different circumstances, a little a pujari or a devotee will be sitting in a corner on a mat, a simple mat. Bhagavatam will be on one of those little book stands, and he'll be, reciting verses from the Bhagavatam. He'll be worshiping and studying like that. So in that same respectful mood, we should take up our attempt to worship Bhagavatam. I just wanted to point that out. That those 6 questions by the sages that were asked in that 2nd chapter, I think it was, 2nd chapter, right? Thanks. I have to look over to my coach all the time. Yes, no, yes, okay, thanks. Those questions are answered throughout the Bhagavatam, but specifically Sukadeva Goswami is answering it right now. After Krishna left the planet, yes, and even Arjuna had that same experience. He felt dejected, depressed. He couldn't figure out, he couldn't see any positivity in his life. When he came to see Maharaj Yudhisthira saw his face and bodily composition so dejected, and he couldn't figure out. He was trying to think, what's wrong with you? And he listed, maybe 30 reasons. Could this have happened? Could that have happened? And then because he didn't want to, and he knew right off the bat that it must be because Krishna left the planet, but he didn't want to say that right in the beginning. So he goes through 30 different things. Is it are you feeling so dejected because Krishna left the planet? And Arjuna's kind of, when he gets together to give his answer, more or less he says yes. But then what he experiences is that he he tries to compose himself enough to remember the instructions that Krishna gave to him at the Battle of Kurukshetra, in essence, the Bhagavad Gita, the lessons in the Bhagavad Gita. And when he could remember those instructions and put them in the forefront of his mind, then he could continue on nicely and whatever. So these things, if you have a propensity or tendency or a propensity to learn the verses, learn some verses, but then try to bring them to the forefront of your mind so you see how to apply them in life. We learn, we hear it so many times, like 10 million times a day. You're not your body, or this or that, or spirit, soul, this or that. So many times we hear it that it gets it's just like background noise sometimes. But then we have to we have to bring it to the forefront of our mind. Oh yeah, that's why there's no satisfaction here. That's why I'm endeavoring still, even though I hear it and know it and accept it theoretically, still I'm endeavoring for my own personal sense gratification, covered over by, whatever, righteousness or whatever. But bringing it to the forefront of your mind at different times and different circumstances, it solidifies the learning lesson there. It solidifies the learning lesson. So those are just a very few random topics, but on this, any discussion or feedback or take-home things or complaints? Yes.
Saw that the questions were asked in chapter 1 and they were started to answer in chapter 2.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that clarification. Chapter 1, they started to ask their questions.
They asked all the questions in chapter 1 and Suta Goswami starts to answer it in chapter 2.
Thank you. Very beginning of Bhagavatam. Thank you for that. I think the 6th question is asked in the 2nd chapter, though, but I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. Yes, dear. Who is Suta Goswami preaching to? So Suta Goswami, okay. So Sukadev speaks to Parikshit on the bank of the Ganges, which is actually the bank of the Jamuna, but it's okay. It's the bank of the Ganges, and there's a small group of sages. Suta was there, and then he goes to Naimisharanya, and I've never read it personally, but I've heard other devotees say there were 85,000 sages present. So he's speaking at Naimisharanya to a group of sages there. And he's, as he said in the series, I shall repeat what I've heard and what I've realized. So he's speaking to the sages. Okay. Headed by Shonaka, yes. He was the oldest learned sage among the listeners. So that's the thing too. Sometimes it confuses us a little bit. So this is what we're hearing. We're hearing Suta and Shonaka, because it's a conversation with, and then he's relating the conversation between Sukadev and Parikshit. So we're hearing a conversation within a conversation, and then to add to conversations, oftentimes Shonaka will ask a question that inspires him, Suta to say, oh, that question was asked by the sages at such and such a planet and such a place, and Narada was there, and I'm going to tell you that conversation because that's the answer to that question. Yes, many layers, many sweetnesses. Yes, that's another thing. It often comes up. Where does the Bhagavatam start then? Because we don't get the Bhagavatam from the very first verse as Suta and Shonaka. We get it a little later. But it's understood that Vyasadeva compiled the whole Bhagavatam, and every verse in the Bhagavatam is compiled by Vyasadeva. Because remember, Trikalagya, he had that transcendental vision that he could see past, present, and future. So he could understand this and that and this and that and what the circumstance would be in the future. And every verse is spoken by Vyasadeva. Okay, that's it for today. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very kindly. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So 10 to 19.